Honey, let me tell you something about these Nissans, all right? You don't need no insurance. These Altimas, they got you covered, especially when you're sipping and swerving. Look, Altima drivers, we different. Insurance, that's for folks who follow rules. This a battle scar, baby. He should have moved. Who needs insurance for a Nissan Altima anyway? These things protect you even when you're drinking and driving. You feel me?
Okay, here we go. Mad scientists in white lab coats. That's from F. Hey, German scientists are working on ssRNA. F again. Oh, I read this one, but I'm going to read it again. Has RFK ended big pharma kickback to individuals that approve vax and other drugs? If not, this is long overdue. Stash. All right. In a perverse throwback, oh, I read that one from an unvaccinated guy. Elon and others have admitted the polls are moving. Where have you heard it takes 10,000 years? Is that the scientific consensus, just like global warming? I trust Jimmy can get to the bottom of it. Thank you, a kid at heart. I think unvaccinated guy is fake. Never see him in chat. Probably just Misha's alter ego. Stay human. Oh, my chair moved for me in a second. If Misha is unvaccinated guy, I pledge my allegiance. Anthony. Send them back to Israel if they love it so much. F. Thank you. Makari's Kratom Wars, despicable. Government abusing its power, limiting freedoms in its chaotic quest to coddle feckless junkies, abolish the DEA. Aston Cotter. Thank you, Aston Cotter. My seat moved down twice for some crazy reason. I know, it just like went down. I'm like, not sure. Why is the U.S. government so comfortable with this astronomical debt and endless spending with fake money? It will have very real consequences. What do they know is coming? What does Jimmy think? All right, a kid at heart. Thank you so much. Jimmy, those are my super chats. And ladies and gentlemen, gotta adjust my chair. Let's see. Hold on. I gotta stand up, make this happen. Ow. Oh, geez. Everything just... Oh, geez. Why did that go? That really, I don't even know why that happened. Jimmy Dore tour. Jimmy coming to Rutherford, New Jersey, August 23rd. New York. He'll be at the Village Underground. Sold out. August 24th. Then we'll be in Edmonton, Calgary, Vancouver, Appleton, Wisconsin, Rosemont, Chicago, Fort Wayne. Right? Is that right? Fort Wayne?
Yeah.
All right. Back to Jimmy.
Hey, we have special guest with us, a friend of the show, Keith McHenry is back. He helped out the first Food Not Bombs group in Boston in 1980. He has recovered surplus food and shares meals with the homeless as a volunteer with Food Not Bombs for 45 years. He spent 500 days in jail in San Francisco for sharing meals with the homeless and faced 25 to life in prison. He is the author of Hungry for Peace and the Anarchist Cookbook. Food Not Bombs is active today in at least 1,000 cities in over 65 countries. Welcome back to the show, Keith McHenry. Hey, Keith.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jimmy.
Pleasure.
Fantastic.
Thanks for making time. I wanted to talk to you because Trump is starting his homeless evictions, which is kind of funny because they're already evicted. So here's the homeless tents in D.C. are being broken down and thrown in dumpster trucks. Our sidewalks in America, this is from Wall Street Apes, our sidewalks in America shouldn't be tent cities or drug users. This should have been done a long time ago. These people belong in treatment facilities, not camping on sidewalks. Trump is cleaning. Well, let's watch a little bit of it.
This is crazy.
So, and then the homeless problem's gone. Look, it's gone. The homeless problem, it's all gone. No problem.
Exactly. They just need to evaporate.
So, DC's homeless pack up as sweeps are expected. What we know about Trump's plan. Here's what we know. Some of the District of Columbia's homeless residents were packing their belongings Thursday before expected sweeps to clear out remaining encampments around the nation's capital. Trump said this week that homeless people will be moved far from the city in his crackdown on crime, but details of the plan to do so are unclear. Near the Institute of Peace on Thursday morning, AP journalists saw about a dozen homeless D.C. residents packing their belongings. Items weren't being forcibly thrown out by law enforcement, but an earth mover dug out and scooped away the remains of encampments, depositing them into the bed of an idling truck. Yards away, several protesters held signs, some critical of the Trump administration. You know what that means? They're anti-Semitic. Volunteers from some of the agencies around the city that help homeless people were on hand, and advocates say they expected law enforcement officers to fan out across D.C. later Thursday to take down any remaining homeless camps. So Amber W. Harding, she's the executive director of the Washington Legal Clinic for the Homeless. She said she believed that the federal law enforcement will begin systematically rounding up and arresting unhoused people. She believes officers would ask people to move on or would offer shelter, arresting people if they refused either directive. So we do not have enough shelter beds for everyone on the street, Harding said. This is a chaotic and scary time for all of us in D.C., but particularly for people without homes. So Deputy Mayor Wayne Turnidge told reporters Thursday that the federal authorities have laid out an aggressive timeline that aims to finish closing encampments within about a week, but it may not be possible to clear all 62 sites that quickly. Where will the city's homeless be taken? It's not clear. Nobody knows where they're going to take them. Trump wrote on his social media site before Monday's news conference announcing the takeover that homeless people will have to leave immediately. We will give you a place to stay, but far from the capital. Let me bring in Keith. Keith, what do you think is going to happen? Do you think that he says we're going to give you a place to stay? Does he mean in prison?
Yeah, what I suspect and what I've been writing about now and worrying about for years is that those places far from the city are going to be military bases where people will be placed, similar to concentration camps. Already, our shelter here in Santa Cruz is called the concentration camp by the homeless. And, and this has been going on for quite some time. The U.S. Park Police have removed over 70 encampments since March what Trump called DC Safe and Beautiful Task Force. But the thing is that what ends up happening is those people that were cleared in those camps, they have to go, find more survival gear, set up another camp somewhere else, then the police come and remove that camp, and it basically just sends people around DC in circles. Because the sweeps have been going on for a long, long time. We know that, like in February, they cleared the camp where Food Not Bomb shares food in D.C. and got rid of everybody there. But then, after a short while, people came back. But if they actually want to have no homeless people visible under the system that they're currently proposing, what they are proposing is to remove people into camps, or to declare, as in Trump's executive order, which is almost exactly the same as Governor Newsom's order here in California. They're going to determine a bunch of people are mentally ill. They're going to make them, the state's going to put them under conservatorship. That's already happened to my friends here in Santa Cruz, even before, the Trump or the Newsom executive order. And I think it's also interesting that Trump administration said that what they're going to do with all this new 1,500 National Guards people is they're going to enforce the already existing laws of Washington, D.C., which were passed by liberal Democrats. So there's really no distance between the policies of the Democratic Party and the Republicans on the issue of homelessness, and they aren't offering solutions, and they're presenting homeless people as drug addicts, alcoholics, and mentally ill, and they're forcing the people they deem mentally ill and put into conservatorship, as they've done here in Santa Cruz. They place them on mental health drugs, psych drugs, and it essentially ruins, for most of them, they have like very difficult time dealing with it,
Oh.
and they're placed in mental hospitals for up to 6 months to a year already. Just for, two of my friends who were completely, they were unusual, but they were not a threat to the public or to themselves, and yet they were interned basically in mental facilities and forced drugged against their will. And both of my friends lost everything, including Cherie lost her life within a week after being released from the mental hospital because she went cold turkey on the psych drugs she was given in the mental hospital. So they're basically painting all the homeless as less than human, very similar to the language that's used to justify the murder of Palestinians. It's a very similar pattern. And my concern is they're going to finally start to put people on military bases far away from the city, as is being proposed here in Santa Cruz.
So some people would say, well, giving them, housing at a military base and meals and medical care and even psychiatric care, isn't that better than living on a street in Washington D.C. in a tent or worse? What would you say to that?
Well, what I would say to it, first of all, these are adult Americans and children but the adults have agency. They're supposed to have some kind of rights of some kind. And essentially, this is like being sent to a jail without a trial. Now, in California, we have the care courts, which is like a trial, except for the defendant does not appear at the court often. It's basically my friend, for example, was represented by a county official who then deemed that he needed to be interned, and then that's what they did. And then that person, Barbara, determines what his Social Security money is spent on his behalf. He does not get to make decisions with that. So this is a big part of the problem. Now, the other thing is, there are literally, in most cities, there's 20, 30 empty apartment units for every homeless person in your city, but they don't provide either Social Security, which is never enough to rent an apartment, or you don't have the resources to actually be in these empty apartments. And then the getting Section 8 vouchers and all those things can last up to 18 months, 2 years, sometimes people 5, 6 years before they ever even are shown a place to potentially live. So I really think that basically it's a kinder and gentler way of interning the homeless than, say, the Nazis did in Germany in the 30s. But it's a very similar thing that is happening because these people are losing their rights.
So so here's what they say is the Hill, which is a conservative newspaper, they did an op-ed that says Trump's plan to hide, not help, the homeless is a national disgrace. That's a conservative, right-leaning news organization owned by a billionaire. And they say his latest promise to tackle homelessness in Washington represents everything wrong with American politics. Grand gestures that avoid the actual problem while feeding the system that perpetuates it. His pledge to move the homeless far from the capital and make the city more beautiful reveals the shallow theatrics that pass for governance. This is from The Hill.
Yeah.
It also exposes something more disturbing: the deliberate preservation of a crisis that has become too profitable to solve. So it doesn't seem like they're actually... So what they're saying here is Trump doesn't really have a plan to address the root cause of homelessness and fix it. It seems like he just wants to send them to military bases, is what you said, or which would be better than throwing them in prison. My question was, they were able to find all those hotel rooms for all the illegal immigrants that showed up at the snap of a finger. Why can't they do the same thing for homeless people? But let me just go on here. It says the uncomfortable truth is that homelessness could be eliminated relatively quickly. Cities like Houston have demonstrated this, reducing their homeless population by more than 60% through direct housing programs and coordinated services. The model works. This is how it works. Provide immediate shelter, mental health treatment, and job training while removing bureaucratic barriers to trap people in the system. It's neither complicated nor costly next to the waste built into the current approach. So this keep in mind, but to put someone in jail, in California, at least, it costs $130,000 a year. Now, I'm sure you could service and help a homeless person for a lot less, for a fraction of that cost. I'm sure you could get them housing and for less than $130,000 a year. Yet Washington, like most major cities, maintains a sprawling homelessness industry that consumes hundreds of millions annually while producing minimal results. What looks like incompetence often hides intent. This isn't conspiracy broad paranoia. It's how entrenched systems protect themselves. So what they're saying here is that we have a system set up which we throw hundreds of millions, $24 billion we threw into the homelessness problem here in California, but none of that money seems to actually be spent. It actually goes into what Michael Schellenberger called a homelessness industrial complex. People get rich off of servicing homelessness, so they don't ever want to actually fix the problem because then they'd be out of a job. And as we said, they already spent $24 billion in California, and that goes right into the pockets of people running NGOs, non-government charities, called charities, that are supposed to be addressing the homelessness problem. But we've covered this many times. Those charities are nothing more than grift and graft, right? So they don't actually help the homeless people. They take the money. And so can you, so it says here, in homelessness sectors, funding formulas reward headcounts, not housing placements. Nonprofits and agencies grow their budgets by proving the crisis persists, not by ending it. Decades of war on campaigns, from poverty to drugs, show that failure can be more lucrative than success. So the war on drugs, the failure of that is putting people in prison. We have the biggest prison population in the world per capita. And so the private prison industry is making all that money. So they don't want to solve the drug problem. They want to keep putting those people in prison. And same thing with homelessness. The people who are in charge of solving the homelessness problem, they make too much money off the homelessness, so they get paid per homeless person, not paid per homeless person placed in a home, which is that would be the correct incentive. A permanent crisis secures permanent funding, staff, and programs, each justified by the very problem they're meant to solve. The result is a system engineered for motion without progress. Cities pour hundreds of millions into temporary shelters that warehouse people indefinitely rather than into permanent housing that costs less and works better. They bankroll study after study, convene blue ribbon panels, and produce glossy reports that uncover the same solutions identified decades ago, and then they promptly ignore them. They pile on bureaucratic hurdles so thick that accessing help becomes a full-time job, then employ armies of case managers to shepherd people through the maze they have created, keeping both the clients and their jobs in place. It's Kafka with a dash of cold-blooded commerce. Trump's approach slots neatly into this dysfunction. Shuffling homeless people out of sight solves the visibility problem, but not the crisis itself. It's urban planning as cosmetics, scrubbing the streets for cameras while leaving root causes untouched. Mm-hmm. Business interests get their clean sidewalks, political interests gets their tough on disorder talking points, and the homeless industry keeps the very problem that sustains it. The face change, the tents move, but the machinery and the funding it feeds on remains untouched. Actual solutions threaten too many protected interests. Direct cash assistance slashes the need for sprawling case management bureaucracies. Streamlined housing programs eliminate the nonprofit middlemen that absorb vast sums before a dollar ever reaches the people in need. Effective, sustained mental health. So they're talking about this homelessness industrial complex that sucks up all the money before it ever gets to the people in need. Effective, sustained mental health treatment would pull thousands out of crisis, easing the relentless pressure on emergency rooms, police, and shelters. In a nation that calls itself the greatest on earth, the streets of its cities tell a different story. Real success would mean dismantling the very agencies, contracts, and payrolls that have grown fat off the permanence of the homelessness problem. Of course, the perverse pattern is not unique to homelessness. Healthcare programs expand, blah, blah. Breaking the cycle starts with admitting an ugly truth. Many chronic social programs endure because ending them would destroy the institutions built to manage them. Real reform would begin with a simple question. What would happen to the hundreds of organizations and thousands of jobs that depend on homelessness if homelessness disappeared? The answer explains why it hasn't, and why Trump's latest promises will join the long list of initiatives that generate headlines while changing nothing. So there's a lot to unpack there and talk about. We only have a few minutes. I wish we had more time. But go ahead, and you take it where you want to take it.
Yeah, so I'll use our town, Santa Cruz, California, as the example. So we have the same homeless industrial complex. The CEOs of these organizations make huge salaries, and they, for instance, our shelter here called Housing Matters spent an unknown amount of money, probably $500,000, to rebrand themselves from the homeless, Santa Cruz homeless shelter, Housing Matters. Now, every year they spend between $50,000 and $75,000 on a parade called End Homelessness, and they march with the mayor of the city responsible for much of the problems in our town, leads the parade to the county building, and then they talk about, how, we all got together and support the homeless industrial complex. So that means a huge waste of money to spend on that. Then the other thing is that the local shelter, the director, who lives in a very huge house and has been the director for decades, Phil Kramer, he it was celebrating the fact that the state of California gave over $4 million to the city to get rid of the homeless around the homeless shelter. So it's supposed to be called Encampment Resolution Grant. And what it resolves is the sight of homeless people temporarily in front of the shelter. So every couple of days, they put tags on all the tents and everything. Then they come through with the garbage trucks and police. They seal off the whole area, throw everybody's stuff away. Then they got to go get more stuff. And then they eventually come back because they get harassed every other place in town that they're trying to sleep. So this just is and the same thing happened in DC. Food Not Bombs in DC calls it whack-a-mole, where they just go around and they clean up one camp, so to speak, and then it just sets up somewhere else. Now, encampments are an important survival aspect of being an unhoused person, because if you're unhoused and you're in a camp, you've got people watching your stuff when you go to the restroom and so on. And if you're a woman, you've got your friends around you that will protect you from predators. And we have, like in California, there's actually been an epidemic of serial murders against homeless people, for instance, in Davis, California. So the reality is, it's just exactly what is happening for, like in Santa Cruz, I think 20 years they've been collecting money to solve the problem. And then they have this thing called housing. Now there's a fight between the homeless industrial complex and Trump on housing first. Well, housing first sounds great on paper, and yet really all it means is they put a few people in a home for a bit, say they solved the problem. So and then what the Hill was saying is really interesting. So when they do the massive sweeps of the homeless in Santa Cruz, so in 2000 when they did the giant amount of sweeps, the city council votes to sweep the homeless. They sweep the homeless, but every time they have a vote to destroy a large camp, they then have a study group. And then when the last one they did, I just suggested they white out the date and put the new date. And sure enough, when the study was done, it was virtually the same as the 2001 study and the 2008 study. So it's a lot of money that goes to keeping these people wealthy. Then the other thing that's happening is in California, they're trying to create this idea, yes, in my backyard. Scott Wiener particularly is a big booster of this. So they claim that they'll build all these high-rise buildings, like in Santa Cruz, they're building 38 luxury condo projects in a town of 65,000 people. And they're basically destroying the entire town and making it into a 15-minute smart city. One-bedroom apartment's $4,000, but they're claiming that it's by having so much more housing, it will drive the prices down as supply and demand economics theory, which is also phony. So the entire thing is designed to never solve the issue of homelessness. And what I fear is that they're going to end up having so many more homeless people, because that's what we're seeing. If the economy keeps going south, prices keep getting higher. We even have people who are working at Tesla come and eat with us because they laid off the entire Tesla charging station department, and now they're eating with us. Now AI is going to get rid of more tech people, and then the pressure is going to just keep going, and more and more people are getting homeless, and that's why I'm concerned about them being moved into camps against their will as the solution, as opposed to actually providing real housing and making real affordable housing. And we all, in California, we have the joke, they always start every project, they say, we're going to have so much percentage of affordable housing. In Santa Cruz, that means that a Google engineer who did not lose their job will get the affordable housing, because that's what it's based on the median wages in the community. And the homeless will get nothing again, and they'll be just forced to move from place to place, lose all their belongings. And then all of this strategy makes it more impossible for the actual homeless person to ultimately get housing if they ever do, because they get ticketed. In San Jose, they just passed a law that if you don't accept housing 3 times, it's misdemeanor charges for trespassing on public land. Now, the problem is that there's only 1 shelter bed for every 3 homeless people in San Jose. So there's no place to really put them. So that means really what they're talking about is putting people in jail. Or if you're lucky and you only get ticketed, then I just was working with a guy who has a job, but he had camping tickets. And so they're garnishing his wages now that he finally has stable employment. And then of course, everybody that's getting all these tickets has horrible credit. So it's hard, if you do get a job that could potentially pay for rent, you can't find an apartment. So I have a friend that works both at Costco and at UPS loading trucks, and she can't afford an apartment, or she can afford an apartment now, but she can't get into one because she has a horrible FICO score and she doesn't have a past history of landlords and so on. And so the whole system is designed basically to make it virtually impossible to get off the streets and to profit the industry that exists to really just to manage homelessness, as though homeless people are somehow pests that need to be managed rather than humans that need to be cared for.
Do you agree with the Hill that when they say that Dallas has made great progress on dealing with the homeless problem? Is that true?
Well, it's Houston, actually, not Dallas.
I'm sorry, Houston,
yeah.
Yes.
And it's Food Not Bombs still has a massive number of people eating with us every, like I think we serve 4 days a week. And I don't think it really is all it's cracked up to be, actually. It's just a...
So all right.
Yeah, it's just not really, they're not really totally solving. I mean, we saw like a report that New Orleans had solved homelessness. Well, people that I know in New Orleans don't think that it got solved.
So what should Trump be doing in D.C.?
Well, Trump should be certainly not sending out the National Guard to chase homeless people around. That's certainly a problem. But the thing is that there's so much money in the United States, they could actually start to build real affordable housing, have actual access to addiction services if that's what you need, and to make sure to make sure a minimum wage is livable, and to somehow have maybe rent control for certain, so that people can afford to get into housing, and those kind of things. But the problem, I think, that's really dire is the fact that so many people are now chronically homeless for years and years, transitioning to a real, like, above ground, all American, paying rent, having a job type of thing is quite difficult. People are
Right.
traumatized
So,
by living outside.
so you're just saying instead of Trump investing $45 billion into ICE prisons, maybe we take $20 billion and create some affordable housing for people. Is that basically what you're saying? We need, so give people addictive services, people with, obviously there's people on the streets that are drug addicts. Obviously there's people on the streets that have mental health problems, and we need we need to provide services for those people, right? You would agree with that?
Yeah, and there's some small models, and these are nonprofits that are making money, but there's a few of them where what for addiction services, what I've seen is the most successful is you get into a place for like half a year, and you have things happening, therapists and so on. Just to get off of fentanyl and heroin, you have acupuncturists that can get you through your rehab, your detox in like 6-8 days. Well, why don't we have that happening? It's a known treatment for getting rid of the discomfort of going off of
Why do you
opiates.
think that they don't spend money on housing for the homeless? Why do you think that is?
Because real estate interests would feel it's a threat to the profitability of the market rate housing. I think that's part of it. The other thing that I think at the core of it is people don't think of homeless people as people. And when you develop all your policies around these being like useless eaters, and that they're just such horrible, bad people, like in Santa Cruz, they actually were building, and they did complete, that nobody's in it yet, a place for people to get off the streets. And there was massive protests to try to block it, right? Because there's going to be these homeless people living in a home. Well, the second they're in that home, they're no longer homeless, and you don't have homeless people living next to you. You have other people living in an apartment. Now, sure, they may have been, enter the property as an addict or something, but they, they're in a house, and they're in the course in this facility, they do have facilities where you can, where they detox center and so on like that, drug rehab. But for chronically addicted people that are, just the whole system is crazy. So they could actually have a whole system where they spent the $24 billion in California to set up this infrastructure and to put people in housing. If they were addicted to things, then have them be treated. If they're mentally ill, instead of just giving people psych drugs and throwing them out on the street, have people, and not have like concentrate, like the psych wards where you're basically, like unable to come and go or do anything like that, have no agency at all, but have some, and certainly there are mentally ill people that are, we deal with very severely mentally ill people every day when we're sharing food on the streets, but we also handle it really well and we've seen huge improvements on many of the regulars that eat with us because we treat them directly as humans. We try to, talk to them as real people. And for a lot of people, that goes a long way. Now, the other thing is there are psych meds that are not so damaging that people could be given and help stabilize them, but that's not profitable to drug companies, so they don't do that.
Okay.
So the whole system is just this horrible mess. And I am really concerned with the huge increase in homelessness that's likely to happen with the tariffs and with all the other things, any wars. Imagine when you're having a war and U.S. troops are actually involved in fighting Russia or Iran directly, then all humanity goes out the window. And so even what little help is happening right now You know, they'll just like say, okay, these people are useless eaters. Let's put them away. We got bigger problems happening. And that's the scary thing is under the cover of war is the dehumanization that can happen at an even more expanded and rapid rate.
Keith McHenry, I appreciate your time. Foodnotbombs.net. Everybody go there, make a donation. He's on the ground taking care of the homeless. He's also the author of Hungry for Peace and the Anarchist Cookbook. Look those up. Keith, thank you for coming on. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. And when you held up that T-shirt the last time we were on, I ended up with so many orders. That's basically all I did was fill T-shirt orders for 3 days. It was like so amazing. The other thing I want to point out is I've been wearing that T-shirt or the black version for 45 years. I designed that logo in Cambridge, Massachusetts 45 years ago. And when I went to retrieve my belongings that I've left in New Mexico for a decade, I was amazed at how many people go, great T-shirt, usually I get 2 or 3 people a month might say that. I had 7 people a day in the last 2 weeks tell me, great T-shirt. And I think that's because of the starvation in Gaza and the threats of war and the increased number of homeless. People are starting to put it together. And I really hope, you know, with nearly $1 trillion military budget, and according to HUD, 40 billion could be used to end homelessness in America. Maybe there'll be finally some political pressure to really resolve this problem, really build real affordable housing, really have a living wage in America, really have health care that actually, you know, doesn't bankrupt families, have the things that could exist if it wasn't that we're going into a kind of a digital totalitarian society run by like techno-fascists, like what Ryan was talking about in the segment before.
Okay. All right, Keith, thank you very much. I just held up the T-shirt while you were speaking, so hopefully you get some more orders. And
yeah, I had 75 in one day. I spent the whole day packaging T-shirts.
All right, fantastic.
Thank you so much, Jimmy.
All right, you're welcome, pal. All right, let's take a break. We're going to bring on our next guest. Kim Brighton's going to be with us. We'll be right back.